So this is it. Tommy Oliver's last hurrah. 25 years after first introducing him, they finally decided to give Tommy Oliver a decent send-off, and I must say it was way past due. I was getting so sick of seeing him pop up in shows with no explanation of how he can use powers we know he lost years ago. They got Jason David Frank on the show just for nostalgia's sake more often than they wheel out Christopher Lloyd to cameo as Doc Brown. As a fan of Power Rangers since day one, I felt like it was time, as long as they did it properly, as long as it felt like there was something on the line and actual consequences would change. So I was a bit apprehensive about this one, because it's a tall order, and you know what? They did a good job. I don't watch Power Rangers anymore. I'm too old to sit through the cheese and enjoy it for what it is. So for me, it's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or nothing. I always touched base when I knew Tommy was going to be in an episode, just so I could keep up, but nothing compared to the original series. And when I learned about Tommy's new Master Morpher and that it featured in Soul of the Dragon, I looked it up on the Power Rangers wiki and discovered it made its first and only appearance in a single episode of the current Rangers series, Super Ninja Steel. So I googled the episode and I was surprised to learn how much Power Rangers has evolved since I was a kid. The first thing I saw was an extra scene from the episode that extended Tommy's fight, and that was just shocking to me. When I was a kid, we were lucky to get a Power Rangers movie, but now they're sharing extra scenes on the internet, much like with the Lord Drakkon trailers for Shattered Grid, and that's brilliant. It's mind-blowing, but it's brilliant. So I watched the episode. It's called Dimensions in Danger, because I didn't want to miss any key elements that might be relevant to the comic, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, and it was nice to see Rocky and Kat there too. I don't remember Rocky being that much of a goofy guy when I was a kid. That must have been something that was added after Mighty Morphin ended, and I always thought Kat was gorgeous, which is a tough act to pull off when you're stepping into Amy Jo Johnson's shoes. But I don't remember her smiling in this episode at all, or even talking to Oliver once, which struck me as weird considering they're supposed to be in a relationship and have a kid together. You don't really learn anything about the Master Morpher, so if you wanted to, you could completely skip the episode and just move straight on to Soul of the Dragon, but I definitely recommend checking the episode out. It's a bit of a standalone episode, so you don't really need to know any backstory, or at least I didn't feel lost watching it, and I've never seen Ninja Steel before. What's interesting though is someone called Lord Draven is the bad guy. Not only is his name similar to Lord Drakkon, but he attempted to shatter the barrier between all the Ranger worlds so he could rule them all. And when he does, it's shown to be pink cracks, and I really thought it was going to lead up to Shattered Grid. Alas, it is a kids' TV show and not really connected to the comics, so Lord Draven was defeated and the barrier between worlds was repaired with some quick thinking by Tommy, using his Master Morpher to switch to the White Ranger and use an awful CGI Falcon Zord to save the day. Seriously, the models looked way better, and even the CGI in the first movie was better. But whatever, it was only 3 seconds, and it was nice to see some of the old crew back together. The highlight of the episode though had to be when Tommy was fighting an evil robot version of himself. It's hands down the best fight I've ever seen in Power Rangers, and the intimacy brought by having it as a one-on-one fight mixed with the speed and camera angles really made the fight feel like something else, and it allowed for some very, very cool shots of Tommy switching between his morphed forms mid-fight, and once even switching from the red Zeo Ranger to the White Ranger mid-air after doing a backflip off his opponent's chest. His morpher seems to cycle backwards, so it starts with the Black Dino Ranger and works backwards through all his iterations, so you know where it ends up, and it's really well done. I really do recommend you check the episode out before reading Soul of the Dragon, because while it's not necessary, it's the last episode Tommy was in before we see him in the comic. So it sets up the nostalgia ready to go, shows him with the beard and a similar jacket to the one he wears on the cover of Soul of the Dragon, and even though he's never seen, it acknowledges the existence of Tommy's son, JJ, who has a major role in the comic. Soul of the Dragon was written by Kyle Higgins, who is pretty much the guy single-handedly responsible for resurrecting the Power Rangers in their current comic form, having written Mighty Morphin Year 1, Year 2 and Shattered Grid. So given the fact that Higgins was at the helm, and as far as Power Rangers stories go, this was an important one and had to be done right. I had faith it would be good. The book focuses on an older Tommy, a much older Tommy actually. You know how Peter Parker kind of looks like a bum in Into the Spider-Verse? That's what Tommy looks like here, which is odd because he seemed to have a pretty good job as a teacher at a school. He's married to Kat, and JJ is his now adult son in training at the SPD Academy. I know nothing about SPD, but it seemed to be like a kind of space academy, which was cool enough. Tommy suffered really bad back problems at the hands of some monster, as well as having his morpher broken in the fight, so he's pretty much retired now. It would have been nice if Higgins had written in who sent that monster, you know, like which series villain sent it, but the end result is the same. The fact is, Tommy's back doesn't work without a device that helps support his spine, and it actually looks a lot like Doc Ock's cerebral implants from Spider-Man 2. He doesn't look after himself properly though, and it's a really old unit that should have been upgraded a long time ago, but Tommy seems to be suffering from some kind of PTSD after the event of his last fight, so he doesn't like going to the doctor because he knows he'll have to lie and say he was in a car crash. It seemed like a weak reason for him not to go to the doctor if it means he'll be able to walk again, but overall it shows how the many fights through all the years have taken their toll on him both mentally and physically. Anara is one of JJ's friends from the SPD, and what looks like an Equation, you know, the alien rangers from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and she ambushes Tommy one day and informs him that JJ has been missing for weeks, and this sets both Tommy and Anara off on the main plot of the book to find JJ. I won't go into it in too much detail because there's not massive amounts there, but what's there is really good. And it was pretty cool to see that, just like in the Ninja Steel episode, every time Tommy morphs, it goes back to the previous Ranger, so once again you know it's counting down to green, and even though I only really like the green and white Rangers, it was still pretty cool to see Tommy switching out between the Rangers throughout the book. Of course this comes at a cost, because where Tommy is using the broken Master Morpher, each time he morphs, the power coin for that Ranger breaks and can never be used again. It's sad, but this is one of the driving forces behind the book, and it works really well. One of my absolute favourite moments in the book was seeing Finster and how he had been transformed and how he went out of his way to help Tommy. It really was heart-touchingly sad to see his fate, and I felt sorry for Tommy because his whole world seemed to be stripped away from him bit by bit. At the beginning of the comic you see him looking at a picture of the original Rangers in Ernie's juice bar, and you realise that by the end, apart from Kat and JJ, he has so few people in his life that he considers Finster to be one of his best friends. And it was a great bit of writing because as a reader I really felt it tugging at my heartstrings. The journey Tommy takes with Anara is interesting because he constantly tries to protect her, and what that does is effectively mess everything up. Tommy's having real trouble accepting that he just quite simply cannot do the things he used to do anymore, and it bothers him that he can't protect people. But this is why his journey is so good. It's a journey where he either has to accept that he can't do it and will have to rely on other people now, or things will go badly wrong and may cost him JJ's life. And that's not an easy decision for a guy who spent his entire life fighting evil at the front lines. This gives Tommy that one last bit of growth he needs to experience as a character before he can be willing to accept that he doesn't need the suit anymore, and it sets up the ending very nicely. I'm going to talk about the ending now, so spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the book yet. I know the book is still pretty new at this point, so I don't want to wreck it for you, and you have been warned. Ultimately, it turns out that a street gang has been using power crystals to temporarily transform into Rangers, and the person supplying them is known only as the Witch. Of course, the obvious train of thought is Rita, and that's stupidly exactly where I went. But it wasn't. See, Higgins, he's a smart guy, and he's used this opportunity to explain something the Power Rangers fandom hasn't had a proper explanation for in 25 years. Brace yourself. What happened to Scorpina? Where did she go in the second series? Was she affected by Zordon's energy wave and redeemed, or did she somehow escape it? Higgins has answered all those questions here, because the Witch is none other than Scorpina herself. And don't forget, these are the TV versions of the characters, not the Mighty Morphin or Go-Go comic versions. So what's printed in this comic is the official reason Scorpina wasn't around, and it's a great explanation. I liked that it was Scorpina because some of the Rangers' most difficult moments in Season 1 revolved around Tommy and Scorpina, so it seemed fitting to me that she was the final bad guy Tommy would have to face, since she was one of the very few that had never actually been dealt with properly. It turns out she tried to steal Rita's spellbook to gain more power for herself, but it was a setup, and Rita sent her to the Talos dimension, which conveniently is the same dimension Lokar, the other blue floating head from the show, exists in. That's a testament to Higgins' writing, because Lokar was the other bad guy from Season 1 that was never heard from again, and we never got an explanation of what happened to him after the Zordon wave. Because of the fact this is 20-something years after Scorpina's last appearance, she's aged, and as such her character design has changed too. Her golden headpiece that had always looked like hair now also has the twin spikes coming up from the sides of her head that are very reminiscent of Rita's hairstyle, and it shows how Scorpina has tried to emulate not just her power, but who she is. And this works in the story because Scorpina only landed in this situation in the first place because she wanted to emulate Rita's power. Of course, it's Power Rangers, so it all escalates to a final battle, and it's Tommy's White Ranger versus Scorpina, who grows, and I noticed her giant form is different from in the show. It seems a bit more human and definitely less monstrous, but perhaps that's an effect of aging or being trapped in the Talos dimension? Sadly, there are no Zords here, but I guess Higgins left them out because he just couldn't work out a way for them to get there that would fit within the story, so in my opinion, leaving them out was the right choice. This is where Tommy's journey as a Ranger ends, and it's a bittersweet moment because on the one hand, we see the original Green Ranger one final time. On the other hand, it's not Tommy. In one last final bit of character growth, Tommy realises he can no longer carry on the way he has been. He knows he can no longer do the things he used to do. He knows he will have to pass the mantle on, and it's this that the entire book has been building to. He tosses his Master Morpher, JJ catches it and transforms into the Green Ranger. Who else is better equipped to become the Green Ranger other than the son of the original Green Ranger and an SPD cadet? It's like JJ was born or written to become the Green Ranger. It was a bit obvious this was the direction Higgins was going to go in because apart from those reasons, I just can't see anyone permanently killing off Tommy because he's just too much of a part of the institution. It also would have been the obvious route to go in, but by breaking his morpher, which led to the loss of his coins and passing on the legacy of the Green Ranger, it shows that Higgins sat down and tried to work out a way to end Tommy's time as a Ranger permanently without doing the obvious death scene. JJ, with his new powers and help from a few other Rangers from throughout the series, eventually deal with Scorpina, and Lokar disappears into the ether as he always seems to do, which I believe is another nod to the original series by Higgins. Tommy and Kat disappear into the sunset, and JJ and Danara are called back to action, where we see the final panel in the book, an image of JJ transformed into the new Green Ranger. And I have to say, I'm not keen on the redesign of the Green Ranger suit. In my opinion, Mighty Morphin had the best suit designs, and I think that's why every now and then the show has costumes that seem to bear resemblance to the original series. Just look at Megaforce's Yellow's helmet design and compare it to Mighty Morphin's yellow, and look at Wild Force's red and white Rangers helmet designs and compare them to Mighty Morphin's red and white. That's not a criticism of the shows for using very similar designs, it's just me saying I can see why they did it. Mighty Morphin had the best costumes and helmet designs. So when JJ morphed into a Green Ranger that was similar to Tommy's, but had a pretty boring helmet with a very dull visor, an SPD logo on its forehead, his costume half black and none of that dragon detail built into the helmet, I thought it was quite disappointing and a bit of a step back in terms of character design. If he'd have just morphed into the original Green Ranger costume, I would have been a very happy bunny. And I know this isn't the end of the world, it's just the end for Tommy as a Ranger, so JJ can carry on his legacy and do it in a costume that suits him, but the fact is that costume is just not as cool as the real Green Ranger costume. I've got to admit, I accidentally saw some of the back of the book before I started reading, and I saw the opening scene from year 1 where Scorpina hands the crystal to Rita, and I thought, wow, they're playing with time, that's going to be so cool. At one point in the story, Scorpina mentions the Zordon wave that occurred at the end of Power Rangers in Space, and 6 years of an overarching story, I might add. So we know that Soul of the Dragon takes place in the same universe as the TV shows and not the comics, because Zordon's wave never appears in Go-Go and Mighty Morphin comics because of Shattered Grid. So as I was reading the book, when I realised Scorpina was the main bad guy, I thought they were going to do some kind of time trip where Scorpina goes back in time with one of the crystals that Lokar had given her in this comic, and that's what she gave to Rita at the beginning of year 1. I think that's a brilliant idea, because that would have explained how she got the crystal, which she describes as collecting chaos energy, which is exactly what Lokar's crystals did in this, and it would have explained why it was so difficult to get, why its energy was strong enough for Lord Draken to sense from another dimension, and the biggest thing of all is, it would have led directly from the end of the TV shows to a new comic universe, the same way Star Trek introduced the Kelvin timeline. It turns out though, when I saw the back of the book, it was just a preview of year 1 and not a tie-in, so all that is moot. And the fact is, the Power Rangers comics don't need anything like that, but since this comic takes place in the TV universe, I just think it would have been a nice way to link everything together in an ever so subtle way. Giuseppe Caffaro did the pencils and inks, with Marcela Costa doing the colours. Overall, it was good, but the one thing I would say that I wasn't a fan of was the way Caffaro drew Kat. You can tell that he's aimed to draw Tommy, even if it's not the most realistic style, but when he draws Kat, it's like he's never seen her face before, so in the 20 or so panels she's actually in, she has a different face for everyone. In fact, I haven't kept up with Power Rangers after Zeo started, so I was wondering who his wife was, and I only knew it was Kat because she had blonde hair, and I googled it. You would never have guessed by the looks alone that it was her. The same thing applies to Scorpina, although since she's in it a lot less, it's a lot less noticeable. Caffaro has used lines to draw detail and let Costa handle the shading, which gives the book a darker feel than the Mighty Morphin comics, but that works here because this is the end of an era, it's the end of a generation, it's where we see one of the greatest TV heroes of my time reduced to an old man without his powers, and it's not supposed to be an upbeat, fun thing, it's supposed to be sad. This is basically like the end of Lord of the Rings, and you know Samwise is never going to see Frodo again. It's that kind of sad. So having bright colours and sparse line work just wouldn't have cut it in a comic like this that's supposed to be a swan song for a 25-year-old character and fan favourite. So I think the art team mostly did really well. The back of the book has a concept art gallery, the preview of year 1 that I mentioned, and some ads, and I was expecting a foreword at the beginning, but nobody's done one this time. I haven't read any Go-Go yet, but I know both years 1 and 2 and Pink all have forewords by actors who played the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So because David Jason Frank was a consultant on Soul of the Dragon, and he wrote a foreword for year 1, and this is his character's final portrayal, I expected to see something, anything from him, but he was notably absent. I'd love to see a hardcover that collects Soul of the Dragon, Pink, and any other end stories for the original Rangers that they may release. Having them all in one hardcover would just be really nice to go with the hardcovers of years 1 and 2. Overall, Soul of the Dragon was a great way to give a long overdue goodbye to a character I absolutely loved as a kid, and Higgins has also given closure to Scorpina and Lokar, something I don't think any Rangers fans ever thought was going to happen. It's had ups and downs, and just like Mighty Morphin, Higgins was smart to stay away from the childish monster stuff and focus on making it a journey about Tommy alone, because it let him focus on the more emotional stuff in his life, as well as drawing on and answering the biggest unanswered question in Rangers history. The art was mostly good, with only a few things I didn't like about it, and the comic felt like it was a fantastic goodbye to Tommy Oliver, the TV version at least, and ultimately I was happy with the way things ended. And the good thing is, we know that while Tommy may not bear the mantle of the Rangers anymore, at least we know there will always be a Green Ranger. Maybe now JJ can go and get the Dragon Zord. It hasn't been seen since 1995.